going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Miko, joined by my guy Morgan here. And Morgan, we are here on a not victory Monday. Unfortunately, the Lions will not be going 17-0 this season. That record that the Miami Dolphins set all those years ago will stay intact for having the only perfect season in the NFL. I say that obviously tongue-in-cheek. Obviously, it's not great to, when your team loses, and definitely not in the fashion that the Lions lost. But we're going to try and do something here today, Morgan, that I think is difficult. I want everybody watching this video to understand it is difficult to be critical of your team, but also keep that big picture mindset. So that's what we're going to try to do today. We're going to try to react to this game. What we say about this game says nothing about the rest of the season because those games haven't been played yet. So Morgan, I don't know about you. I'm still really frustrated about yesterday, and I'm sure that frustration is going to come out in multiple times throughout this video.
No doubt, man. And I love that you told me you were going to make this the first thing we talked about, because I think it needs to be said. Because when I first got into wanting to start writing about the Lions, it's because I enjoy objective, good analysis and thinking. So that's why what made me start reading, Jeremy's work and Eric's and Ryan's and everybody, and that's what made me want to write for Pride of Detroit. And I still read a lot of people's stuff because I consider them great writers and they offer different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. And at the end of the day, that's what makes it fun, man. We know this is a really good football team. And like you said, they were going to lose a game. I had said it to my boy. I didn't want to tweet it because I didn't want to, I'm pretty superstitious. But I'd said it to my boy and my friend Sweta, my boy Wilson and my friend Sweta, about I was like, it's tough to beat a team 3 times in a calendar year, which is what the Lions were attempting to do. Because you think back, what was it, October and November, when the Lions went to Tampa, beat them 20-6. They just really good defensive day there. The playoff game, obviously, and then this would have been 3. The Lions, it's frustrating, bro, because this is how I feel, and I think you probably feel the same way based on our conversations through today, but the Lions lost this game. Sometimes I can walk out of Ford Field. It was hot, too. I'm not going to lie. It was 80-something degrees when we got out of the stadium, so I was extra mad. When I walked to my car, I was not happy. But that was a game the Lions lost. Sometimes you walk out of there we just got beat. Like that Thanksgiving game against Buffalo a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I walked out of there. I'm like, okay, they we're early in this rebuild and they went toe to toe with a good team. You walk out of there, that was a funky taste in my mouth, man. I did not like that. So.
No, man. And I, like I said, we're going to kind of get into it here as we kind of start with some of our questions. I'm not sure what this video technically is going to be called. It's not necessarily a recap as much as it is we're just kind of reflecting on some big points throughout this game. But yeah, the Lions do go to 1-1 on the season, losing to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 20-16. And honestly, Morgan, this was just a really rough day from the offense. I don't know, It's weird to say that because if I showed you the box score, you wouldn't think so. Over 400 yards of offense, over 300 yards passing, over 100 yards rushing. Those numbers stand out. Your number one wide receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown has a bounce back game, goes for over 100 yards. J-Mo has a great second game, over 75 yards receiving. But yet they still come out on the losing end. And there's a lot of talk already happening around Detroit on just who should shoulder the blame. And I think there's enough blame to go around. But when you look at this game, is there someone that specifically stands out on the offensive side of this that just is hey, this person has to take a bigger slice of the pie when it comes down to why this offense just performed so poorly?
I definitely think it's a mixed bag. And I'm not saying that to, a cop-out answer. Hear me out. So obviously, Ben Johnson, that was not his best game. I'm usually not one to nitpick over play calling because contrary to what a lot of people think, I've coached football a little bit, played it. I would not want to be a play caller, man. Maybe one day, but that seems stressful to me, even at the high school level. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So it seems it's something hard to do. And typically Ben Johnson delivers us a lot of really nice performances. But it was just a mixed bag, man. And to your point, you look at the box score, 463 yards to 216. In favor of the Lions, 33 minutes to 26 minutes for time of possession. No sacks. Goff did get hit quite a bit. But yeah, man, it's an odd game to lose. And that's kind of why I said the Lions lost this more than Tampa Bay won. But yeah, a win is a win. Tampa Bay and their fans, they're not going to be saying sorry for anything. And they shouldn't.
No.
You know what I mean? A win is a win in this league. So But yeah, to the point, I would put it on Ben Johnson, Goff, and then pass pro. I want to get into it. I've watched just a bit of the film. I'm going to watch the rest of it tonight after I make some food here. But I want to see because there was a lot of plays where I'm like, yeah, Goff was under pressure. Like the pick he threw, the second one he threw, he got blasted. A couple times, I want to see how Jameer held up in pass pro. That's somewhere where Monty still has Jameer by quite a bit. And hey, listen, not everybody can be built like David Montgomery. Okay.
Yeah.
Like that man is built like, the Lord intended to make a running back when he made David Montgomery. This is the way I'll put it. You know what I mean? Like, so when he pass blocks, I feel like the linebackers feel it. You see some head snap back but yeah, I think there were some let ups, there were some breakdowns there, and that led to some issues with Goff and accuracy. And I think you mentioned it before we hopped on, man. I think Goff was kind of pressing. I don't know. It was a weird game, right?
Yeah. And that's kind of how that's kind of what it boils down to me as well, is that it was just a weird, funky game. And I'm very similar to you in thinking, like, through most of that game, I am not one to nitpick play calling because, one, like you mentioned, it's very difficult. But two, like, we don't understand progressions. We don't understand where the ball is supposed to go, when it's supposed to come out. So it's really hard to say, like, that's a horrible play call when we don't know the ins and outs of how a play is supposed to develop. I will say the longer that game went on, the less I started to feel that way. By the fourth quarter, when it was like go time, I was like, not a fan of how we are choosing to play this game at this point, especially once the news came out that, Tampa Bay had lost Vita Vea. And so in my mind, and I don't know how that's communicated on the sidelines. I don't know how a decision is made at that standpoint. But in my mind as a fan, it's like, oh, well, this is go time to pound the rock. Like, get David Montgomery in there and just see if they can stop it. I don't care if it's a bunch of 3-yard runs. Like, let's just see if they can hold up. In Morgan, that just never happened. I think, in fact, like, once that news kind of came out on the broadcast, I feel like they were still like the next couple plays was a couple like, back-to-back passing attempts. And so I'm with you in the sense that everyone shares a good portion of the blame. I do tend to lean a little bit more towards Jared Goff only because of the simple fact that, like, some of his plays, some of his throws directly leaded to turnovers. So obviously he had 2 interceptions on the day. One of them highly questionable, right? A pass interference that probably should have been called, and that would have absolutely reversed that interception. But the second one is blatant. The second one puts you in a situation to where, a lot of people are also debating today the mishap at halftime about the Lions not being able to get the kicking team on and be able to kick that field goal. Both of that play and Jared Goff's second interception to me are very much like similar. The only reason I put Jared Goff's interception a little bit higher is that mishap with the field goal unit happens at the end of the first half. You have 6 points that you were able to put up in the first half. You have an entire second half of football to erase that mistake. And you doubled down on it by turning over the football when you had an opportunity to, at the very minimum, come away with 3 points. And so that is for me personally, I'm with you. I don't think Ben Johnson gets to skate scot-free here, but Jared Goff has played at a certain level at this point in his time in Detroit that it's like I've come to expect him to play at a high level in most situations. And this is probably one of his, more lackluster performances.
Yeah, and we talked about it, I feel like, in the offseason, but like these are just sometimes he has these games where he doesn't value the football enough. And I know that makes me sound like an old curmudgeon, like, around football, but you got to value that rock, man. That rock is life. That means everything. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that second pick, he got blasted. There was some interior pressure, but I just didn't. It was 2nd and 16. The hold had just happened on Frank Ragnow, of all people. I also hated that call. Look at me complaining about officials, too. But Frank had his hands inside on the breastplate, let go once the running back, because he's a vet. He understands. Like, in my opinion, you don't call that. If the hand's out here, sure. But the hand was up here in his chest on his breastplate where it's supposed to be. So I thought that was a ticky-tack call. But yeah, 2nd and 16, man, that's points. Like, we're assuming, yes, Jake Bates hits a shorter field goal, but that's the NFL. That a lot of people think, that's the calculus. So, but yeah, both things cost you points. The snafu at the end of the first half, and then that one. And like you said, this one happens later. And to your point, 1 for 7. I'm sure y'all have heard it by now if you're watching this video. 1 for 7 from the red zone. That's rough, man. You gotta come, even if you score, you take two of those possessions and one's a field goal, one's a touchdown.
Yeah.
You win that game yesterday, probably pretty semi-comfy.
Yeah.
That's the game. Like Jeremy tweeted that right at the end, and I'm right there with him, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things too. And like again, trying not to be too hard on Jared Goff in this situation, but like when going back and you and I watched like a couple of plays from yesterday's game, just watching some of the all 22. And there's just a couple instances where, again, even if the play call is questionable, or even if the play call is good, there were a couple instances where it just feels like he's predetermining throws. And these are things that, again, as a veteran in the NFL, you just should know better not to do. Ryan Matthews brought this up in the podcast last night, and I couldn't agree with him more. These are things that we were getting on Hendon Hooker for, but when Hendon Hooker does it, it makes sense, right? He's second-year player, hasn't got a lot of NFL experience. You would expect him to maybe, have bad tendencies. Jared Goff being this seasoned veteran, these are things that you just can't have happen.
Yeah, I'm right. There was little things too, man. And I'm not piling on Goff. Goff's a really good quarterback still in this league, and I fully expect him to bounce back because he's shown us he can do that. And it's only a 2-game stretch. Like, we're not here on fire, people, right here. I want to say that here in the middle of the video, because like we said, we both feel really good about this team. But there's another instance, to Ben Johnson's credit. If you look at the stat line, the Lions ran the ball for, rushing yards. Where is that?
It's like 139 rushing yards.
139 rushing yards total.
Yep.
So yeah, like that's darn good. They did really well there in that regard. Like they broke off chunks, but to the same thing, there was a lot of negative plays, and a lot of them happened, towards the end of the game. But like there was a lot of negative plays too, and I think that kind of led to the disjointedness of the offense as a whole, because it sucks as a play caller, I'm sure, when you're starting a lot of like 2nd and 14, 2nd and 12. 2nd and 11, even 2nd and 10 sucks. That's like, you're like, dang it, like you have some ground to make up there, because that you don't want to end up in a 3rd and long and then allow Todd Bowles to dial up some helter-skelter pressure, and that's not fun to deal with as a quarterback. Yeah, that's where it is, man. You got to be more efficient. Like, they ran the ball well. Like, I love that play call on 4th and 2, like the little misdirection handoff. Like, love that. That was nicely executed, but for every
timed. But then follow that up with a screen pass, or just like throw to the halfback behind the line of scrimmage. Like, again, these things just didn't make sense.
I put that on Johnson, and then there was to make my point, the Lions run a lot of slow developing counters. And what I mean by that is they're like Jaws taking counter step to the right, and then typically Panay and Zeitler, or Panay and Frank, or whoever are pulling, and you're getting blockers out in space, and it takes a while to develop. And there was this safety, I believe, walked up to the line of scrimmage. No one's over there. And if you're Goff right there, if Frank doesn't check out of it, which typically you're not going to during a running concept, you need to check out of that play. And he didn't, and Jameer lost like 5 yards because he got the ball, and there's a
dude in the backfield, like right next to him.
And it was right after like a pretty nice play too, if I'm not mistaken. Like, it was like I was like, okay, cool, we're rolling. And then, okay, it's 2nd and 15. That's a drive killer. It's little things like that, man. It's the difference between the Lions eking out a win in a game which they dominated versus losing a game they dominated.
Next thing that I kind of want to talk about, Morgan, like speaking of like the opposite of that, right? Like, this is, like you said, those are little things that lead to big impacts. This is something that I think is growing into a larger concern. Again, only 2 games into the season, but 2 games into the season, and Sam Laporta just doesn't seem to quite be himself. And I'm not putting it on him. I just also think that he hasn't been featured as much as we've kind of been accustomed to, or at least what we got accustomed to last season. Where is your level of concern with, again, his production, or just how he's being utilized so far in the season?
So like 1 out of 10, with 10 being like really, really concerned. I'm at like a 3 or 4, just because it's 2 games now, but I think this is almost like a basketball situation, and they're trying to figure out like usage rates. Like, if you're a basketball fan, you know what I'm talking about. If you only watch football, it seems like they're going to have to figure out like, okay, how do we distribute these 35 passes Goff throws a game between Amon-Ra, Jameson, Sam, the running backs, etc. Right? Like that's where I think that they're going to have to figure some things out here in these first several weeks of the season because it's kind of new, right? Like JMO seems to be a dude.
Yeah.
They're like Goff trusts him a little bit too much sometimes. So like, can we stop throwing it to JMO when he's bracketed? Like this man's Calvin.
That would be awesome if we could please stop doing that.
Well, let's just throw it to him when he's got some space, please. Like he was making some tough catches. He has through 2 weeks, but goodness gracious, man, there's been like the speed out that we were looking at in the red zone that made no sense that no one had a chance to catch. So I think that's what it is. Like, what about you?
I'm about at a 5. Like I'm mildly concerned, right? And it's only because it's also usage. And I think usage is at least something that you can control in terms of like, it doesn't even seem like he's getting the opportunities to run some of the same routes that he ran last year that he was getting open on. And I agree with you. I know there's a lot of mouths to feed on this offense, right? You're trying to get, obviously Saint needs his touches. Obviously JMO's emerging and you want to continue to get him featured and continue to make him a threat to opposing defenses. But Sam is absolutely a threat. And you brought up the speed out play that they ran in the red zone. I think it was like on the 4, 5, 6 yard line, something like that. You have Sam Laporta staying in to block. And he was one of your best red zone targets last year. Like, again, I don't think there's anything wrong with Sam's ability. I don't think he's somehow like he's not even getting opportunities at this point to again showcase himself. And this week was definitely worse than the previous week. But even last week, it took them a while to kind of get Sam involved in the game plan. And so it's a little bit of concern because you mentioned like, okay, how do they divvy up 35 pass attempts? They threw it 50 times. Yesterday, so like if you're going to do that, then you had better be getting Sam Laporta involved in some capacity because that's just too many passes and him to not be getting a good share of those targets.
Yeah, and Sam is that dude after the catch. Like we saw that last year. The man's got a lot of wiggle for being a 6'3", 250-pound, like basically wide move tight end that can block. So, yeah, you look at it, man, like this is where I think what I was talking about with like the figuring out how to distribute targets. Amon-Ra, 19, Jameson, 11, Jameer, 7, Sam, 3, he had 2 catches. And he had the one catch where he turned upfield, someone bounced off of him and he converted a big, I think it was third down. And
yeah,
that's what he is to me, man. That's a chain mover because he understands leverage. He understands how to get open in zone. He's a man beater because he's a freaking nightmare in terms of like mismatches. Like he's a 6'3", 250-pound guy with wiggle. That's tough to deal with if you're a DB, unless you're an alien, and there's not a lot of those in the NFL. So yeah, I think you got to get him involved, and I think that will do a lot to calm Goff down, like in terms of just settling him down and getting him back to 2023 Goff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, like there's a lot of mouths to feed, and I think everyone has their specialty. I just hope they're not forgetting about what Sam Laporta is because like you said, he is a chain mover. He is someone that I think you can still line up anywhere. And I think if you get into these situations where you're keeping him in just to block, and we didn't talk about it too much, but you did mention it. Jared Goff did get hit quite a bit. I think I looked at PFF and they had it like around 20 pressures that he had that the Bucs had on him. So yes, they were getting there, but how many of those could have been like quickly avoided or countered with just like leaking Sam Laporta out on some of these like quick chips and things like that. But I think that's enough about the offense. Like we've hammered the offense. This video is already about to be 20 minutes long, and we've been very, very negative. Let's talk about the lone bright spot, which is this defense, which is Aiden Hutchinson getting 4.5 sacks. I'll make this a 2-part question. I didn't write it this way, but I will make it a 2-part question. First and foremost, looking at Aiden, looking at the performance he put up, how do you feel about him being probably considered a front runner for Defensive Player of the Year? And on the backside of that, looking at this defense as a whole, how do you feel about them possibly trending towards being a top 5, top 10 unit in the NFL this season?
If they end up being a top 5, top 10 unit, this team is going to go on a deep playoff run again. I can say that with a lot of confidence. You know what I mean? So I think that's definitely on the table. And you look at Hutch's performance, man, so far through 2 weeks, got 5.5 sacks, 12 pressures, 3 hits. The man is eating. Like, you watch it live, and you can see it when you're watching at home too. Like, just watch him sometimes. Like, just pay attention to him on certain downs. Like, just watch him.
Mhm.
He is destroying people. And it sounds like the next 2 teams the Lions play are going to have backup right tackles. I would leave him over there. He had some reps against Wirfs, and he won a couple too. I remember watching, because I was like, if he gets over there, I'm going to watch it, because that's must see TV. But yeah, he's definitely taken it up a level. And Dan Campbell said today during his presser, he said he thinks he's got another level to go up. And I'm like, well, if that's the case, this is going to be pretty good, because yeah, I do think in order to win one of those awards, you kind of have to come out of the gate super hot, just to get yourself out ahead and start campaigning, almost, or just have a crazy, finish. But yeah, I think he's up there, and I want to give Levi and Aleem and those guys their flowers, because Levi a lot of the time is back there with him. Hutch just beats him there, I will say.
I was gonna say, I feel like it's the difference of like 10 pounds. Like, it's literally that's the difference.
Yeah. I'm sure Levi's like, dang, like there was Levi split a sack with him, and then there was another one where on the first watch, I was like, I said to my boy Wilson, I was like, that was a Levi and Aleem, or Levi and Hutch, excuse me, and he was like, nah, that was just Hutch, I think, bro. And then we looked at it on the Jumbotron, and I was like, oh, okay.
I know which one you're talking about, because I thought the same thing too. I was like, all right, like, cool, like Levi's got another sack, and I was like, looked at it, and I was like, nah, that's Hutch's.
Yep, he was there, but yeah, nah, that was Hutch.
But it's like I'm right there with you. Like, as much as Hutch is like the driving force, he is going to be the reason. He is going to be the player that a lot of these opposing offenses are going to be game planning for. The fact that you have Levi Onwuzurike and Aleem causing havoc in the middle, and in some situations Levi being able to play that big edge, like it doesn't give you any relief. You don't have the opportunity to breathe, because like they're literally rushing from all angles at this point. So I'm right there with you. Someone had said it in our comment section that Hutch would have 20 sacks this season, and I kind of was like, I don't know. And in the middle of that game, I'm like, that dude might have been right. Like, he might get very close to 20, because like you said, he's got a couple more matchups against backup right tackles. We're gonna get into the Cardinals tape this week. He's going to have some work to do to get to Kyler, but you put a backup tackle in there, you better just make sure that Kyler has his cardio all the way maxed out for that game.
Yeah, you're going to be running first. That's how I feel too, because he stepped, like I said, he beat Wirfs a couple times. I was like, ooh, because we kept hearing in training camp he was beating Panay and Decker here and there. I'm like, oh, you beating Panay, you're doing pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm good. I'm happy to see that. And then just overall, man, I love the presence of Reader. There was early downs, like, one thing I'm always watching for when I'm in person, I'm trying to pay attention to personnel. And on early downs, sometimes from left to right, it would go like Derek Barnes at the Sam over there, right?
Yeah.
And then it would be like Aleem, Reader, Hecko, Levi. That's a big, nasty front, man.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to be tough to run against. You want to talk about, then the Bucs did. They kept trying, and kind of to their demise, man. They were burning a lot of downs, like just slamming Rachaad White and the other guy up into nothing. Just the Lions were fitting things up right. That was really nice to see. Jack Campbell had a couple TFLs, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, just overall, it's good, and it's being buoyed by Hutch. Like, we talked about it all. I feel like so many videos during the offseason. If Hutch can take a step up, it'll do big things for this defense. And I think him and another cat, Brian Branch.
I was just about to get to the secondary, because I was going to say, between Hutch, leading the charge with that D line, and then Brian Branch locking things down at that safety position, coming away with the interception, 2 passes defended. Just a really good performance by the secondary. I know they gave up the touchdown to Godwin. I know Godwin had over 100 yards. He was on my fantasy team. I appreciated, at least the output for that standpoint. But it
was all in the first half. I will say that he didn't have a yard in the second half.
I was going to say, nothing in the second half. They contained Mike Evans. You didn't really allow a bunch of big plays over top. So yes, Terrion had a very questionable pass interference, which I still contest was not pass interference, but that's the nature of being an NFL fan. You're not going to agree with what pass interference is. No. But I thought, other than that, and like you said, other than Carlton Davis getting a bit cooked in that first half by Chris Godwin, once that second half came in, they really locked things down. And yes, they gave up one touchdown, but then again, nothing given up in the fourth quarter, and really gave this offense every opportunity they needed to get back in this game and take the lead. It just didn't happen. So really, I don't know. I wish we could have spent more time talking about the defense. We probably should have spent more time talking about the defense. But this was just such an out of character, performance from the offense. A great sign for the defense in terms of like the rest of the season, or at least going forward, because you get a really good, interesting matchup against the Cardinals, next week. And then you have Seattle. Very big challenge for this defense coming up. But if they can match this type of effort that they put out against Tampa, I really like what the Lions can definitely do for the rest of the season, Morgan.
Me too, man. I know we were really negative, and there are gonna be some people down there like, oh, you guys are stink. We're just trying to offer our thoughts. We still think, like, I'm very much still into the belief that this team is one of the best teams in the NFL, the NFC, you name it. Like, and I made this point earlier. Like, I didn't make this point earlier, but I put it in the back of my head. The Vikings beat the Niners, like, what was it, 20-7? Okay.
Yep.
Baltimore with Lamar Jackson, they're 0-2. Steelers are 2-0. Football's weird early on. They're 1-1. I think you're going to have, and speaking of, we're going to talk more about the defense, because I think one of the things we're going to focus on for the Cardinals prep is rushing as a unit. It's going to be paramount against.
So important.
Yeah. Like some of these plays that because Mayfield's a deceptively good athlete. He showed it a couple times against the Lions.
Malcolm.
That was tough, man. That's a tough spot to be in, but yeah, you got sat down. I love that term that you used earlier. He sat him down real quick. But yeah, if you got to rush as a unit and not allow those lanes, because Murray is one of the best athletes in the game at the position. So we're gonna definitely focus on that. If you're wanting to hear more about the defense, stay tuned for later in the week for sure.
Absolutely. But guys, that's pretty much going to do it for this video. If you were looking for more Detroit Lions content, you guys already know what to do. You can head over to prideofdetroit.com. There are new articles being written all the time, multiple articles throughout the day. So definitely check out the website as frequently as you can. And if you're looking for more video content, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and that's going to keep you tuned into any of the video content that we upload over here on the YouTube side of things. So with all that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch. And we'll catch you guys in the next one.